Hi, it's Karn. I'm one of the science educators at the Air Zoo. A lot of us are at home with maybe a little more time on our hands, so I thought it would be fun to try to measure time in a little different way. Would you like to learn how to make a clock with chemistry? Do you like origami and bad puns? If yes, stay tuned. All right, so this is a set of experiments that you might want to try as a family. Some of the steps require paying attention to the detail and the measurement, so it would be a good idea to get older kid help or an adult help for some of the steps. Here's what you're going to need to do these experiments. You will need some iodine. You can find this in the first aid section of a pharmacy. You will need hydrogen peroxide. This is a 3% hydrogen peroxide solution. You'll need apple juice fortified with vitamin C. It's actually the vitamin C we're interested in. This is just a handy way to get it. You'll need a cornstarch solution. I'm going to explain how to make that in a minute. And you'll need some cups and spoons. So I've got an assortment of measuring spoons here, and we'll go over that in a minute. I also have a bowl here that has some water from the sink. So iodine is a really, really cool element. It's an antiseptic. It also is needed by your body for certain hormones. In the old days, if you didn't have enough iodine in your diet, you'd get this weird growth on the side of your neck called a goiter. So to prevent that, a lot of your table salt has iodine added to it. So we're going to do a series of experiments where we're going to test what happens when you mix iodine with various things. So let's get started. Okay, so you will need to make ahead of time a cornstarch solution. So this solution is something you have to make on the stove, so make sure you have adult permission to do that. What you're going to do is you're going to take 1.5 tablespoons of cornstarch, and you're going to mix it with 2.5 cups of water. You're going to bring it to a boil on the stove and boil it for 1 minute. And then after it's boiled for 1 minute, take it off the stove and let it cool. You won't really need very much of it for your experiment, so if you want to take off a little bit and put it in a cup, that's what I'm going to do. It'll cool a little faster. And you can actually store it in the refrigerator as well. Just remember to bring it to room temperature before you use it. Mine's a little bit chunky, but that's okay. Not going to hurt anything. All right, so the first thing that we're going to experiment with is what happens when you mix iodine with cornstarch. So here I have a cup, and this is just regular water. It's about a cup of regular water. And I am actually going to add 10 drops of my iodine solution. Now, this is another note. Iodine is this orangey brown color, and it will stain your fingers. It will stain your clothes, so please be careful when you're handling it. I actually have a paper towel ready, and I put some paper towel on my table to kind of make sure nothing funky happens. All right, so I'm going to add 10 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'm going to carefully wipe it off so it's ready for the next time. All right, so here is my solution. Just diluted iodine now. You'll notice it's not completely clear, but it's almost clear. What I'm going to do is add 1/8 teaspoon of my cornstarch solution. I'm going to stir it up a little bit because it did get a little bit chunky when I stored it in the fridge. Okay, now watch this. It turns blue. And if I added just a little bit more, like I said, the concentration changed a little bit as I stored it in the fridge. It's going to be darker blue. Isn't that beautiful? I'll explain a little bit more later, but just know that the iodine and the starch are kind of complexing together. So that is what happens when you mix iodine with starch. That's the iodine starch reaction there. Put that one over here. All right, you could actually test this on a few other things that you might have in your house. So think about some foods that you eat that have starch in them. For example, potatoes, or bread, or an unripe banana. You could compare an unripe banana to a ripe banana and see if there's a difference. Just be a little careful, again, the iodine will stain, and make sure you put it on something that you can easily clean off. So now that we know a little bit more about what happens when iodine and starch react, let's try another reaction. So in this case, we're going to take iodine and we're going to mix it with our apple juice that contains vitamin C. So in this cup, I've put a 1/4 cup, so 1/4 cup of apple juice is already in this cup. And what I'm going to do is I am going to add 1 teaspoon of iodine. So I've got my teaspoon here, and I'm gonna carefully measure it out. It does dribble a little bit. And I'm gonna put it on this plate here that I have ready. Oops, I spilled a little bit, so you can see it really will stain. So when I close it, it kind of splattered a little bit. But notice, when I stir it, that dark brown, orangey brown iodine color goes away and it's back to the normal apple juice color. Pretty neat, huh? So that's what happens when you react iodine with vitamin C. It makes basically a colorless solution. So with starch, it makes this kind of blue or blue-gray solution. And when you react it with vitamin C, it's colorless. All right, so now for the clock. So to do the clock experiment, this is where we're gonna use our hydrogen peroxide. So I've actually put 3 tablespoons, so 3 tablespoons of hydrogen peroxide I've already measured into this cup. And now what I'm going to do is just add 1 tablespoon of water, just to kind of dilute it a little bit. Here's 1 tablespoon of water. Swirl it to mix. And I'm going to add some of my liquid cornstarch solution. So that's a 1/2 teaspoon. So I've got a 1/2 teaspoon here, and remember I have my cup. And I'm gonna stir it a little bit better because I'm trying to make it a more uniform solution. If you make it fresh, you won't have this issue. All right, so I'm gonna put a 1/2 teaspoon of my cornstarch solution into that hydrogen peroxide water mix. Okay, all right, so get that nice and stirred up. Doesn't really do anything exciting yet. So here's my peroxide, water, and starch solution. Okay, so what we're going to do next, we're going to be mixing the contents of these 2 cups. And I want you to think for a minute, what do you think is going to happen? So you know that we had iodine and vitamin C and it made a colorless solution here. We have cornstarch in this cup, and we know when we just mixed cornstarch and iodine here that we had this kind of cool blue color. So what do you think is going to happen? Think for a minute. All right, and the other thing that I want you to do is if you have some way to time, I want you to get out your timer or count to yourself as I mix these cups, because we're going to see how long it takes for this clock to change. Ready? I'm just going to be pouring them back and forth, so it's just an easy way to mix them. And since my cornstarch wasn't freshly made and was a little chunky, that's going to affect the timing of my results a little bit. But I'm just mixing them back and forth. Once you've mixed them for a little while, just kind of let it sit and watch. Have you ever heard that expression, a watched pot never boils? Oh my gosh, wasn't that cool? So that is a chemical clock. And if you've change the concentration of the different components, you can make the clock go faster or you can make the clock go slower. I'm going to explain a little bit more about what was happening with some origami next. I promised you origami and bad puns, so here it is. I have it laid out on my table. Over here, I have iodine, and it's in a form where there's 2 of the iodine molecules. It's a little more complicated than that, but I've simplified it here. When we reacted the iodine with starch, see my star box, we got a colored complex between the 2, and it's this kind of lovely blue color. We also did a reaction with iodine and vitamin C, which is shown here as a bunny rabbit because it's kind of a fast reaction. And when those react, the iodine gets converted into the form iodide. Get it? Does that look like a dead eye? And that is in a single molecule form, and it's charged. It's got a negative charge. So when we mix those 2 cups together, remember we started all the iodine in that 1 cup was in this iodide form. And then we had another cup that had cornstarch in it and hydrogen peroxide. And that's kind of like the secret ingredient because hydrogen peroxide, shown here as a turtle, slowly converts iodide back to iodine. So when enough of that has been converted, all of a sudden then, the starch that's just been kind of hanging out waiting can react with the iodine to form the blue color or the blue-gray color. Kind of cool, right? So that's the reaction that was happening in our clock. Try it yourself at home. Do some experimentation with the amount of hydrogen peroxide. Remember to keep the total volume at 4 tablespoons, but feel free to play with the water hydrogen peroxide concentration within that bounds. And then also remember, when you're done having fun with that, clean up carefully. You'll want to pour the solutions carefully down the drain, avoid splattering because of course again they'll stain, and have fun with it. So happy sciencing.